So today I will present our work on the sensitivity of the ocean carbon cycle to terrestrial inputs of carbons and nutrients using the ECCO-Darwin model. And let's start with some numbers about the ocean carbon budget. So the ocean is a big reservoir of dissolved organic carbon. It's estimated about 37,000 gigatons of carbon. And the ocean is exchanging carbon with the atmosphere, and this exchange is regulated by the balance between the atmosphere and the ocean. And with the increasing anthropogenic CO2 emissions over the past few decades, the oceans has absorbed about 25% of these emissions. And it ends up with an uptake of atmospheric CO2 by the oceans of about 2.5 petagram of carbon per year. And this exchange is also regulated by the amount of DIC at the ocean surface, which is also regulated by the ocean physics, mixing, upwellings, by the solubility cycle, and also biological cycles. And this was the ocean connected to the atmosphere, but the ocean is also connecting with the land. And in addition to the processes I described previously, there is a mechanism that is running in the background since the pre-industrial era. It's a pathway of carbons called the river loop. And this river loop consists of the flow of carbon between the atmosphere and the land ecosystem through photosynthesis by land ecosystem. And then this carbon in land ecosystem is being released to inland waters and rivers, and then routed towards the oceans before being outgassed back to the atmosphere. And this river loop is estimated of about 0.65 petagram of carbon per year. And today, if we look at the global carbon budget, there is a lot of persisting uncertainty between models and products used to do the global carbon budgets. And the river loop is suspected to be responsible of the uncertainty in the global estimate by the carbon budget, because some models do include lengthy fluxes, but others do not. And database products supposedly include lengthy fluxes. They are based on observations, so they look at the ground truth. And the spread between models and products in the global carbon budget is about 0.7 pentagram of carbon per year, which make it consistent with the estimates of the river loop. So one of the main questions is, how do we better represent the river loop in ocean models? And today I will talk about the ECCO-Darwin model, which is a model that is based on the physics of the eco-ocean state estimates. It simulates, for example, the surface currents, as you can see on this movie on the right. And it is coupled with the Darwin plankton model that simulates the cycles of main nutrients and carbons in the oceans, as well as phytoplankton and zooplankton in the oceans. And one of the advantages of this model is that it is simulating the radiative transfer of light through the water columns. So it gives us an information about the light spectra depending on the water constituents, so which make it relevant for comparison with remote sensing products. However, the representation of a river in ECCO-Darwin was simple so far. It was only a monthly climatology of freshwater discharge. without any carbons or nutrients associated with this freshwater discharge. So when you look at globally integrated RC/CO2 fluxes over the last 20 years, you have the database products here represented by the blue lines. You can see that ECCO-Darwin is still lower in terms of RC/CO2 fluxes compared to database product, with a gap persisting throughout the years of about 0.4 pentagram of carbon per year. So the objective of the study was to improve the impact of terrestrial carbons and nutrients in the ocean carbon biogeochemistry using the ECCO-Darwin framework. And to do that, we combine different models and products to connect the land and the oceans. So we use ECCO-Darwin from 1992 to present. It's a 1 degree horizontal grid. And for lengthy fluxes, in terms of forcings, we use two products. So the first product is GR55DO that informs us about the daily fresh water discharge along the land boundaries and this GR55DO is a complementary product to the GR55 atmospheric reanalysis. And we combine it with a Global News 2, that is a watersheds models that compute the total amount of carbons and nutrients being released at the watershed scale. So we have an information for every watersheds globally. So we got about 5,700 watersheds globally, and it's representative of the year 2000. So we have this new ECCO-Darwin version at a 1 degree horizontal resolutions. We add these baseline simulations that include only freshwater discharge. And we conducted 6 sensitivity experiments where we start adding carbons and nutrients either separately or together on top of freshwater. So we added DOC, dissolved organic carbon, DIC, dissolved inorganic carbon, DON, dissolved organic nitrogens, DIN, dissolved inorganic nitrogens, and DSI for dissolved silicates. And we first had a look at the spatial patterns in terms of lengthy fluxes. And what we noticed for the freshwater first is that the signal is clearly dominated by the Amazon River in terms of freshwater discharge. But on this map, you can also notice other main rivers globally, such as the Congo River, the Gange, or the Yangtze River. And then we look at the DOC, so dissolved organic carbon coming from the rivers globally. The signal is still dominated by the Amazon. And you can see that the Atlantic, and especially the tropical Atlantic, is receiving a lot of dissolved organic carbons from the Congo, the Orinoco, or the Parana River. The Arctic Oceans is also receiving a lot of dissolved organic carbon relative to its size. And there is also a lot of DOC coming out of Southeast Asia continent. In terms of DIN, we got something a bit different. So the Atlantic is still getting a lot of dissolving organic nitrogen, but here the signal is clearly dominated by the dissolving organic nitrogens coming out of rivers from Southeast Asia, especially the Gange and the Yangtze River. So the question was how baseline simulation will, how these simulations that accounts for these forcings will differ from the baseline simulations. So beforehand, we make sure that our baseline simulations, represented here by the map on the left, is consistent in terms of spatial and patterns of RC/CO2 fluxes, but also in terms of ocean carbon sink compared to database products here on the right. And then we look at the impact of riverine forcings. And this map is the difference in RC CO2 fluxes between the baseline simulations, so freshwater only, and the sensitivity experiments where we added carbons and nutrients on top of freshwater. And outgassing of CO2 driven by rivers is represented on this map by the red color. Meanwhile, ingassing of CO2, so an uptake of carbons by the oceans, is represented by the blue color on this map with the effect of river. And globally, introducing carbons and nutrients from river has a slight impact. It's only increasing outgassing by 1.5%. However, it results from compensating substantial regional responses. You can see that in the Arctic Oceans and in the tropical Atlantic, you get more CO2 outgassing from the ocean towards the atmosphere, driven by all the organic carbon coming out from coming towards these basins. And in Southeast Asia, you can see that there is an increase of the ingassing when we introduce carbons and nutrients from river, because all of the inorganic nitrogen going towards the ocean is actually fertilizing the oceans, and it boosts the primary production and then the CO2 uptake by biological organisms. So we have this compensating regional response in terms of carbon uptake and outgassing by the oceans. Globally, it doesn't make a big difference when we added carbons and nutrients from rivers. So on this figure, the red lines is our baseline simulation, so just with freshwater. And as you can see with the green line, that is the experiment with carbons and nutrients, it's not reducing the gap between ECCO-Darwin and the database products. And this is because we are still missing some key mechanisms in ECCO-Darwin in order to reduce this gap even more. And one of the first mechanisms I want to discuss right now is the way we account for terrestrial DOC in ECCO-Darwin. First, we use Global News 2, which is an empirical watershed model that doesn't inform us about the seasonal variability of organic carbon discharge. And also, it's only representative of the year 2000. So the next step will be to use the cardamom land ecosystem model that is mechanistic and data-assimilative, and it's solving in space and time the flow of carbon through land ecosystems. And in addition, this cardamom model will help us to better constrain the nature of terrestrial DOC going towards the oceans. Because right now in ECCO-Darwin, we consider that terrestrial DOC is being remineralized at a constant rate of about 90 days, which is not appropriate to capture the regional variability of the nature of DOC, because on this map that is computed by cardamom, you have the residence time of dead organic carbons for each watershed globally. And what you can see, for example, in the tropical ecosystem, you have these young and fresh organic carbons in this ecosystem. And when this fresh and young organic carbon is reaching the oceans, it's very refractory. So it can take hundreds or thousands of years before being remineralized. So we might be overestimating the CO2 outgassing in these regions right now. And on the opposite, in the Arctic, you can see that there is like this old carbon that has been stored for ages. And when it reaches the oceans, it's very labile, so it can be remineralized very quickly. So in the Arctic Ocean, we might be underestimating the CO2 outgassing in our current configuration. Another development right now is the representation of the water sediment interface. And it's a work that is being done by a PhD student at La Rochelle University, Ine van der Sant, because right now in ECCO-Darwin, all the particulates reaching the sea bottom are being buried, and they are not remineralized back to the water column. And his work aims to develop a meta model or a statistical model of the diagenetic RADI model, which is a sediment model. And the problem with diagenetic model is that they are very heavy and they require a lot of computational resources. And the work of INE is to make this meta model, to make it simpler, lighter, and very easy to implement in ocean models. So at the end, we will be able to compute the fluxes of carbons and nutrients going back towards the water column. And we actually did an additional sensitivity experiments with the preliminary work from INE. And this is represented on the figure by the gray lines, which represent the experiment with freshwater, carbons, and nutrients from rivers, plus the sediment fluxes at the sea bottom. And you can see that this experiment is getting closer to database products estimate in terms of RCCO2 fluxes over the last 20 years, which is very encouraging for identifying key mechanisms that will help to close the global carbon budgets with ECCO-Darwin. And finally, one of the last developments we are doing right now is to better represent the LOAC, or the land to ocean aquatic continuum. And this LOAC is a mosaic of ecosystem from land ecosystem, inland waters, rivers, estuaries, wetlands, and then towards the oceans. And there is a lot of gains and losses along the way in terms of carbons and nutrients. And what we are doing right now is that we consider that everything that is being released on land is being routed directly towards the oceans. So we are missing a lot of gains and losses along the way. So we will get a better estimate of lateral fluxes by accounting a better LOAC representation. And also the LOAC is vulnerable to perturbations. And I wanted to highlight a work from my previous postdoc in La Rochelle University in France, where we look at the projected intertidal mudflats primary productions with climate change. So intertidal mudflats are this big area of mud along the coastline, and the primary productions on these mudflats is being ensured by a microalgae that grows at the surface of the mud during low tides. And what we noticed is that with simulations of climate change, without sea level rise, so the panels on the left, the model depicts an increase of the mud surface temperature. But if you look at the primary productions on the lower left panel, there is no major impact of the increase of temperature. So the microalgae might be able to cope with this increase of temperature. However, if you start adding the sea level rise effect on top of it, you can see that on the lower right panel, there is a decline of primary productions, because sea level rise will actually cut out part of the mudflats, but also some parts will experience a shorter duration of low tides. So the amount of light available for photosynthesis for this microalgae will decline. So the combination of the decline of line and the increase of temperature drive this strong decline in primary productions. So this is why with Dustin Carroll, we proposed this carbon monitoring system in 2022. It's a project that aims to better look at the LOAC when connecting the land and the oceans. And the idea also is to look at the effect of upstream perturbations on land, on the ocean biogeochemistry. And finally, I wanted to conclude my presentation today by acknowledging that this is my last week at NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, because I will start a new position on March 10 at Moss Landing Marine Laboratories. I will be part of Dustin Carroll's group, where I will pursue the ECCO-Darwin developments, working on the land-ocean aquatic continuum, the sediment model, the land ecosystem cardamom model, and also helping setting up regional configurations. So in the meantime, you can send me an email to this email address, and I would like to thank all the people that has been collaborating on these works, and I thank you for your attentions. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, my WebEx is not responding very well. Thank you. That was a really interesting presentation. One thing that surprised me is, unless I saw the graphs wrong, it looked like the first one you showed was the spread of model, the time series showing the model versus the product. The models were above the products, and the ECCO-Darwin ones that you show after, it's under. Is it showing something different, or is ECCO-Darwin really different from other models, or yeah, that one?
So this one, yeah, I mean, right now there is still differences between models. Like, for example, some of them does not use carbons and nutrients from rivers. ECCO-Darwin so far was not using it as well. So there is still like inherent differences in models that explain why sometimes the model will be above database products and other model will be below.
Okay, but so if the work you've been showing like increases the estimate, I mean, bring it less negative, I guess, for ECCO-Darwin, that means it's pretty unlikely to explain the gap between models and products overall. Is it correct? Like the sediment, for instance, the sediment flux.
You mean for other models?
Yeah.
Yes, I think each models has its own assumptions, and we focused on ECCO-Darwin for this ones because we know what parts we have to improve in ECCO-Darwin, so that's why we focused on the sediment, and we actually realized that our previous representation of sediment in ECCO-Darwin was overly simplistic, and this just introducing this meta model in ECCO-Darwin just help us to like get closer to database products.
Great, thank you.
All right, up next we have Georgina.
Thanks for that great talk, Raphaël. It's super interesting. So I was curious, so we did a similar kind of experiment adding river nutrients into E3SM model that had some Arctic refinement. And so just increasing nutrients, and we sort of had a climatology, we varied the timing of the nutrients coming in. But the main finding in the Arctic there was that, so that increase, actually putting in the nutrients in the river was increasing the coastal production and increasing the carbon uptake, so in-gassing, not out-gassing. So I just wanted to like look at did all of your you had sensitivity experiments broken down by carbon nutrient? Did you do any of them together, or did your DON ones also show an increase in outgassing?
I can show you this this one. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good question, because we actually use these different sensitivity experiments to look first at the effect of dissolved carbons, so this map on the top, and the effect of dissolved nitrogens, so the map at the bottom. And when you add only dissolved carbons, you can see that you drive mostly outgassing of CO2 by the oceans driven by rivers. And as you mentioned, when you add this sort of nitrogen from rivers, you get ingassing of CO2 towards the ocean. So we cannot really see it for the Arctic on this map right now. But yeah, we have the difference in directions in terms of CO2 fluxes, like you mentioned.
Okay, and then have you had the chance to do this an experiment where you, so in those 6 that you showed, did you do individually just DOC, then just DON, just DIN? I wondered if you'd had the opportunity to do like a combined effects.
Yes, let me go back to this table. So here you can see the one we combined. So we did one with DOC, DIC together, one with DIC alone.
Gotcha. Okay.
And what we saw is that it's mostly DIN that is having a major effect.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool. Okay, great. Thank you. That was really interesting.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great. Any other quick questions before
Sorry, I
we
don't know
wrap?
how to do the raise.
Oh,
button.
yeah, go ahead,
Yeah,
Amanda.
sorry. So yeah, I was just curious. So coming back to your paper for the impact of mudflats or the changes in you're talking intertidal zone at the very end, and
Yeah.
how the response to climate change. How do you get these amazing results? Are you connecting here output from climate models with a smaller model of ecology are you talking about?
Yeah, so that was challenging because the mudflats are like a very important ecosystem globally, but if you look at the regional scales, they are not very big, or they don't have like large extent. Like the one we studied was like about like 30 square kilometers. So quite a big system, but if you look at the output of climate models, you will see a big mismatch between the resolution of climate model and the size of the mudflats. So this work is focused on the mudflats along the Atlantic coast of France, and we collaborated with Météo France, which is the weather forecast institute in France, to actually do a downscaling of a climate model for this specific part of France. So at the end, we end up with like 15 kilometers output of climate models following their work of downscaling. So we could have a finer forcings for our mudflat ecosystem.
Or is this just a regional projection, what you have here?
Yes, exactly.